All right, good afternoon. I am joined today by my colleagues, Ministers Lebouthillier, MacAulay, Ien, and Mendicino, and we will each respond to the Auditor General reports. Thank you. We welcome the Auditor General's reports, and at ESDC, we accept her recommendations. Our government continually looks for ways to improve services to Canadians and support hard-to-reach and vulnerable people across the country. Nous voulons aussi nous assurer qu'il est aussi facile que possible pour la population d'avoir accès aux prestations et aux crédits auxquels ils ont droit. Nous reconnaissons que certains Canadiens, particulièrement les plus vulnérables, sont toujours confrontés à des obstacles pour accéder aux services et aux prestations du gouvernement pour différentes raisons. They do not appear in administrative databases, they do not or are not required to file taxes, and they are not reflected in the census. It becomes difficult to remind them to apply for a benefit by mail or by telephone because we may not know who they are. Nous avons déployé des efforts considérables pour contacter les populations difficiles à joindre et vulnérables. Mais nous devons faire plus. Nous devons faire plus pour joindre tous les Canadiens, peu importe où ils se trouvent ou qui ils sont. En 2020, Service Canada a mis en œuvre l'initiative Servir tous les Canadiens, conçue spécialement pour accroître les inscriptions aux prestations et pour éliminer les obstacles à l'accès et au versement. Through this initiative, we connect directly with communities and organizations who can refer clients to us or help us identify new clients who we would otherwise not know. This work will continue, and we will expand and strengthen it to respond to the findings in the audit. We will continue to work closely with our colleagues at CRA to share information, identify best practices, and collaborate on data collection where it makes sense and where appropriate. Assurer des services fiables et accessibles à tous les Canadiens, peu importe où ils habitent, demeure une grande priorité pour parvenir à de meilleurs résultats pour les Canadiens. Nous poursuivons notre travail pour améliorer l'accès aux services pour les populations marginalisées et mal desservies. L'audit a montré que le gouvernement n'avait pas un portrait net et complet des gens qui ne reçoivent pas leurs prestations auxquelles ils pourraient avoir droit. This finding highlights a challenge that the department has been working to overcome for many years. We remain committed to finding more opportunities to ensure as many Canadians as possible are able to opt into services, benefits, and support. There is always more work to be done. We will continue to develop programs and processes to help overcome barriers to access and to ensure all segments of society are able to access benefits and credits equally. J'invite maintenant la ministre Lebouthillier à prendre la parole. Merci.
Bonjour, je suis très heureuse d'être avec vous aujourd'hui. Before I begin, I would like to say that the Canada Revenue Agency welcomes the Auditor General of Canada's recommendations, and we recognize there remains more work to be done. Nous poursuivons nos efforts pour gagner la confiance des personnes vulnérables et difficiles à joindre, y compris les Autochtones et les nouveaux arrivants au Canada, afin que nous puissions les soutenir partout au pays. Nous voulons également que nos services soient aussi faciles et accessibles que possible pour les personnes admissibles à nos programmes. Nous avons consacré plus de 10 millions de dollars sur 3 ans à un programme pilote offrant des subventions aux organismes communautaires qui organisent des comptoirs d'impôts gratuits grâce au programme communautaire des bénévoles en matière d'impôts de l'Agence et sa version québécoise, le service d'aide en impôts, programme des bénévoles. À titre d'exemple, l'an dernier, plus de 3 400 organismes et 15 000 bénévoles ont aidé plus de 574 000 personnes à remplir et produire leur déclaration de revenus et de prestations. En tant que ministre du Revenu national, j'ai pour priorité absolue d'assurer un régime fiscal équitable grâce auquel chaque personne admissible peut recevoir les prestations et les crédits auxquels elle a droit. And we continue to strive to put people first in everything we do. Je laisse maintenant la parole au ministre MacAulay. Merci.
Thank you very much, Diane, and good afternoon, everyone. First, I'd like to thank the Office of the Auditor General of Canada for the report released today. This is a vital aspect of government oversight. I welcome the recommendations provided to my department at Veterans Affairs Canada. As you know, we've been working very hard on issues outlined in the audit to reduce processing time for veterans. The government demonstrated its support for veterans and their families in February by investing in Veterans Affairs capacity to reduce the backlog and improve turnaround times related to disability decisions over the next 2 fiscal years. The report is a snapshot of a point in time, and we've made some real tangible progress since the audit period ended. In late 2021 and early 2022, we completed an average of 4,900 applications per month. That's a 40% increase over the average for the previous 3 fiscal years. Because of that, as of May the 25th, there were 10,649 applications waiting beyond our 16-week service standard. And overall, we've cut the backlog down by more than 50% since the pandemic started. Still too many, I know, but quite an improvement from where we were. In the spring of 2020, there were more than 23,000 applications beyond the standard time, service time. 9 months ago, at the end of the audit period, there were approximately 16,300 applications outside of the service standard. Last week, as I said earlier, there are 10,649. The audit also noted issues where our service standard calculation, as we only report on the time it took for the decision and not for the payment. We will include this when we report in our 2022-2023 results. So we have come a long way, but I recognize that we still have more to do to make sure veterans get the decisions on their disability benefit applications as quickly and efficiently as possible. We've also made excellent progress in closing the gap in wait times for female applicants. For the 21-22 fiscal year, average for the first applications for males and females were almost identical at 38.1 to 38.8 weeks, respectively. On average, over the 2 previous fiscal years, there was a gap of 7 weeks. We're also working to close the remaining gap in processing times for Anglophone and Francophone veterans. Any gap is unacceptable, and we take this issue very seriously. A lot of folks gave us some good feedback about the disability benefit application process during our recent consultations over Let's Talk Veterans Portal. As always, we're open to all ideas and options that will help us make more timely decisions for our veterans. It's my top priority as Minister of Veterans Affairs. I am committed to resolving this long-standing issue that is so important to the health and well-being of so many veterans and their families. Thank you, and I would like now to introduce Minister Marci Ien.
Mr. MacAulay, thank you so much. Hi, everyone. Today, Parliament received the Auditor General's report regarding the recent audit of gender-based analysis, GBA, and inclusivity. I'd like to begin by thanking Auditor General Hogan and her office for this really important report. GBA Plus is the result of a sustained commitment to applying an intersectional eye, and that's really important, an intersectional lens to everything that we do. It helps us understand the many different identity and structural factors that shape how people experience the world around them. Over time, it's become more intersectional to reflect Canada's population, the diversity of our population. The Government of Canada has mandated every minister to apply GBA Plus across their portfolios. So GBA Plus, in other words, is everyone's responsibility. And while responsibility is shared, Women and Gender Equality Canada plays an important role that includes providing strategic direction. It includes supporting capacity among line departments and central agencies, as well as monitoring progress and identifying gaps and barriers. Women and Gender Equality Canada has also been working with partners at the Treasury Board Secretariat and the Privy Council Office to implement a number of changes. So let me outline a few things since 2015, the 2015 report. We have made GBA Plus mandatory, enacted the 2018 Canadian Gender Budgeting Act to include GBA Plus in all budgetary and expenditure processes, launched the Centre for Gender, Diversity and Inclusion Statistics in response to the growing need for better disaggregated data, intersectional data. We've invested $200 million in that disaggregated data and research that reflects our country and the diversity of our country. And we've developed 2 new training courses for federal public servants on how to actually apply it, how to apply GBA+. Though, as identified in this year's audit report, challenges absolutely persist, including the availability of data, understanding GBA+ as an intersectional tool. And there are gaps in capacity within federal departments to perform this analysis. I can assure you that WAGE is deeply, deeply committed to fully supporting the recommendations put forward by the OAG to make sure that GBA Plus is fully, and I will repeat, fully implemented right across government. Because only then can we better tailor our initiatives. Only then can we implement programs and provide services in ways that respond to the diverse needs of everyone in this country. Thank you. Merci beaucoup. Minister Mendicino, à tout.
Merci, Marci. Good afternoon, bon après-midi tout le monde. I want to echo the sentiments of my colleagues and thank the Auditor General for her report and its insight on critical issues for our correctional system, most importantly, the overrepresentation of Indigenous peoples and Black offenders and the barriers they face. Our government is committed to a correctional system that is safe, equitable, and free of systemic racism and discrimination. The system must support the rehabilitation of offenders and pave the way for their reintegration into our communities. CSC has accepted all of the Auditor General's recommendations and is taking concrete actions beginning now to implement them. Le service accepte toutes les recommandations faites par la vérificatrice générale et passe à l'action en prenant de nombreuses mesures. This begins with the security classification process. CSC will undertake a validation exercise of the custody rating scale for Black male offenders and a revalidation for women and Indigenous offenders. This work will happen in collaboration with external experts. CSC has also begun an arm's-length initiative to develop an Indigenous-informed security classification process. This work is happening from the ground up, ensuring that both a gender and Indigenous lens is employed. Additionally, they will strengthen the oversight mechanism related to security classification decisions for Indigenous offenders. CSC will also review its processes and tools to ensure that women and Black offenders are initially placed at the most appropriate security level. CSC is expanding correctional programs to provide better and more timely access for inmates and is making strides to diversify its workforce. And finally, CSC is also implementing an anti-racism framework as well as a suite of actions and is building a dedicated team to support this work. Alors que le service mène à bien de toutes ces initiatives, il m'a assuré qu'il demeure résolu à constituer et à maintenir un poste en effectif fort, inclusif et diversifié qui reflète mieux la diversité retrouvées dans nos pénitentiaires. A central part of my work as Minister of Public Safety is combating systemic racism and discrimination in the criminal justice system and addressing the overrepresentation of Black and racialized Canadians and Indigenous peoples, and that is work I am enjoined with all of my colleagues who are here today. Just a few days ago, I issued a new mandate letter to the Commissioner of the Correctional Services of Canada with specific instructions to move forward on a wide variety of initiatives to that end. These range from working with Indigenous organizations to provide culturally relevant programming and supports for Indigenous offenders to developing a federal framework to reduce recidivism to enhancing inmates' access to technology. Most significantly, I have directed the Commissioner to create a new position of Deputy Commissioner for Indigenous Corrections, which is a direct response to Call for Justice 5.3 of the National Inquiry into Missing and Murdered Indigenous Women and Girls. This role will ensure appropriate attention and accountability towards Indigenous issues in the correctional system is addressed, including the overrepresentation of Indigenous offenders, especially women, and help CSC to implement the many other calls for justice that fall within their purview. More broadly, our government is engaged in an array of efforts to address overrepresentation. This includes legislation to reform sentencing measures and implementing the United Nations Declaration on the Rights of Indigenous Peoples to address the root causes of overrepresentation. The issue is a priority for our government, and we will continue to work closely with Indigenous and racialized people and our public safety partners to make progress. À ce propos, je veux prendre un moment pour reconnaître le personnel du SCC et le remercier de sa participation à ces efforts. Malgré la pandémie, je suis impressionné par l'éthique du travail du personnel et sa contribution continue à la sécurité publique. Once again, we would like to thank the Auditor General for her support, and I am committed to working with Commissioner Kelly to ensure that we make all of the progress that is laid out in the AG's recommendations. Merci beaucoup, and maintenant nous sommes prêts pour les questions.
Hi, good afternoon, everyone. I guess I just want to start with this question. You know, clearly from these reports, we see that women are being treated differently. Our prison system is racist. Are you comfortable as a government calling yourself a feminist government and an anti-racist government with these results and these findings in these reports?
What we're not comfortable with is the fact that systemic racism and racism still exists within our society, including in our institutions, and that is something that is soberly articulated not only in the AG's report, but it's something that has been acknowledged by our colleagues, our government, and the leaders of these institutions. And we're using the report as an opportunity to accelerate the progress that we have to make. I'll speak on behalf of the CSC because it's the subject of the AG report, and happy to turn it over to other colleagues. But we have every expectation that we will continue to accelerate in rooting out racism in all of its forms in our institutions at the CSC by diversifying our workforce, by improving our training, by collecting data and making sure that we use that data to inform our policies so that those systemic biases are rooted out. And we know we've got a long way to go. That's one of the reasons why I created or have instructed that we create this new position of the Deputy Commissioner for Indigenous Affairs so that we can respond to the call to justice, so that channeled through this office, we're making the progress that we need to make. Maybe I'll turn it over to some other colleagues to comment.
Thanks, Marco. That is such an important question, and it's a good one. And you have heard me use the word intersectional in my remarks, because intersectional means Black, it means Indigenous, it means 2SLGBTQIA+. It takes into account all of Canada. Women and gender equality, this ministry didn't even exist until 2017. It exists because this government prioritizes women, prioritizes the intersectional lens, and frankly, it's the reason that I'm here. Because if you look at what GBA Plus is, I represent GBA Plus, and I am now leading this ministry. I am working vigorously with all of my colleagues to support in every single way that intersectional lens, because frankly, I don't see things any other way, because it is who I am. And so when it comes to, has this government done enough? Has this government approached things from a feminist lens? Absolutely, absolutely. Women are a huge part. That intersectional word again. Black, Indigenous, 2S LGBTQIA+, are a huge part of what we do, and this is an all-of-government approach. A couple of days ago, and I'll end on this, I was in Calgary for an announcement with Minister Ahmed Hussein, the Minister of Housing and Diversity and Inclusion. And we were in Calgary to announce what really encapsulates what GBA Plus is. He's the Minister of Housing, but he was making a $121 million announcement that I was part of to help shelters. Shelters where women and kids would flee to get repairs if they needed them, and also transitional housing, because Minister Hussein has carve-outs for women in particular when it comes to housing, racialized women in particular. That's what GBA Plus is. That's what a feminist approach is.
Minister Ien, I'll just keep it with you.
Sure.
You're a former journalist.
I am.
You're
Listen, once a journalist, always a journalist.
Yes, CTV. You're probably familiar with the term show, don't tell.
Yeah.
How can you tell Canadians that you are an intersectional government, an anti-racist government, a feminist government, when your results don't show that? The outcomes clearly do not show what you're saying.
I think it's also about showing the work. And as a journalist, we do our research, don't we? That's what we do. We look at the whole story. So let me fill in some of that story right now. Since 2015, our government has done a lot with regards to women. And I want to pinpoint some things. I'm going to go from 2015 up until now. Why don't I focus on the latest budget? Because there was some press about that and it not being a feminist budget, okay? In that budget, I was supported, wage was supported by $500 million for a national action plan to end gender-based violence. I have been on the ground across this country, talking to stakeholders, doing so virtually as well. I have met with my provincial and territorial counterparts as well, Indigenous leaders, to make sure that we get this right. To have that kind of support, $500 million in budget 2022 is going to go a long way. Menstrual equity, the Menstrual Equity Fund. My parliamentary secretary, Jenna Suds, is leading right now a pilot program where she is at this point talking to stakeholders, $25 million of support in budget 22 for that, as well as the LGBTQ2 action plan, which very much can be a gendered issue, gendered issues. $100 million to create the first ever LGBTQ2 action plan in this country is going to go a long, long way. Childcare. Minister Gould is standing up here to have every province and territory, and that is not an easy thing to do when you look at bipartisanship and everything else, sign on to a childcare plan. Nobody is going to tell me when I represent Toronto Centre that women have not been front and center on the front lines of this pandemic, and that childcare is going to make a huge difference when it comes to realizing their dreams and making sure their children are taken care of. So just a couple of things to fill in the gaps as to what our government is doing. You okay?
This is a question for Minister MacAulay. Are you saying everything is fine, and contrary to what the Auditor General says, you don't need to have a long-term sustainable plan? That's what it sounds like, and you know, that the Auditor General's report is outdated and wrong, and that everything is working swimmingly. I just wanted you to clarify, please.
Thank you very much for your question. And no, everything is not all right. And in fact, but it's important to realize that the backlog was 23,000 in the backlog about 2 years ago. We have, now it's just over 10,600 in the backlog. We have hired a lot of people, over 100 adjudicators, but it's so important that we keep on this track. Is it enough? No, but we have to make sure that we continue on this track and put this backlog where it should be.
Thank you. And my next question is for Minister Gould. Is the government looking for alternative ways of administering the Canada Child Benefit on First Nations reserves in light of the lagging uptake and the unique obstacles associated with making people on reserve file their income taxes? And if not, what is the plan?
It's a really important question, and so I also want to reiterate my gratitude to the Auditor General because I think she did really important work here, and it's something that we've been working on, as I mentioned in my remarks. Since 2020, we have an initiative called Reaching All Canadians, which tries to find alternative ways to get to Canadians who have not taken up the benefits that they're entitled to. And what's important about the Reaching All Canadians initiative is that it's not just an online form, it's not just a phone line you can call, it's actually people who are trusted in community who are going and reaching out to those who have not made the application. And so there are actual people from Service Canada who connect with third-party organizations who have community relationships where they can go and build that trust in terms of making that application. But it is absolutely a top priority for me. It's been more challenging in the pandemic when you haven't had that direct person-to-person connection and outreach as we've seen in the past on First Nation reserves. And so that's something that we're looking to start up again to make sure that we are building that trust and ensuring that, you know, that uptake that we see in the general population of 97% of those that are eligible applying for and receiving the Canada Child Benefit, we want to see that right across the country. Thank you.
Vous pouvez rester là, Madame. Laurence Martin de Radio-Canada. Moi, je voudrais vous amener sur un autre sujet, les passeports. Il y a des gens qui attendent depuis 3 mois leur passeport. Il y a des gens qui se lèvent, qui arrivent à 5 heures du matin à Service Canada pour obtenir leur passeport. Des gens qui n'arrivent pas à parler à des gens au téléphone. Est-ce que vous trouvez ça acceptable? Et est-ce que vous êtes en train de prendre des nouvelles mesures? Qu'est-ce que vous faites concrètement là, pour régler la situation?
Bien sûr, je comprends que la situation des passeports, c'est vraiment quelque chose de frustrant maintenant au Canada. Je veux assurer les gens que le Service Canada prend toutes les mesures possibles. Nous avons réouvert tous les kiosques, au bureau de Service Canada partout au pays, puisqu'on pourrait servir les gens d'une manière plus rapide. Nous avons contracté presque 600 nouveaux officiers de passeport pour faire le processus plus rapide. Depuis janvier, et nous sommes en train de contracter une autre 600. Et nous avons réorganisé une autre 600. Alors, c'est comme 1800 nouvelles personnes pour répondre à cette demande. La demande, c'est quelque chose d'incroyable. C'est plus grand que anticipé. C'est pas seulement les gens qui ont besoin des passeports renouvelés cette année, c'est les gens que leurs passeports sont expirés pendant les dernières 2 années, mais aussi 85% des passeports qui sont en train d'application sont des nouveaux passeports. Les gens qui n'ont jamais eu des passeports avant, et ça prend plus de temps parce que nous avons fait un processus d'application plus rapide pour les gens qui ont eu un passeport dans les dernières 15 années, mais le volume de nouveaux passeports, c'est quelque chose qui est encore plus grand qu'anticipé, mais je veux assurer les Canadiens que nous faisons beaucoup de choses dans Service Canada. Pour les personnes qui vont en personne à un bureau spécialisé de passeport, c'est moins de 10 jours, donc ils reçoivent leur passeport. Le défi, c'est vraiment avec les passeports qui font l'application pour la poste. Avant la pandémie, 80% des applications de passeport étaient faites en personne. Maintenant, 80% ont été faits pour la poste. Alors, nous avons besoin de répondre à ce changement. mais aussi pour assurer les gens que s'ils vont en personne, je sais que les lignes sont longues, mais nous faisons des changements de processus dans les bureaux aussi, qu'ils vont recevoir le passeport d'une manière plus rapide.
Yeah, and maybe just the portion. Yeah.
Just a portion? Which portion would you like?
The portion, no, but the question, before I do the follow-up, the question was basically, do you find this acceptable, and what are you doing concretely to correct the situation?
Just respond in English.
Yeah, in English,
okay.
and then I'll do my follow-up in French.
Okay, sure. So, look, I understand that the passport situation is very frustrating for Canadians. We are experiencing an unprecedented volume because at this point in time, Canadians who haven't traveled for the past 2 years are eager to get out there, and I completely understand that desire to want to travel. But what we're experiencing right now is not just the people whose passports are due for renewal this year, it's also passports that have expired over the last 2 years. Plus, 85% of the passport applications that we're receiving are actually new applications. So for people who have not had a passport before, adult Canadians who want to travel now, Canadians that have been born over the past 3 years, or new Canadians. And new passports take longer than those that are simple renewals because there's an integrity and a security process that goes through that. That being said, we are taking a lot of measures to try and address this, this increase in demand. Whether it's at Service Canada or passport offices, we've opened all of the kiosks to try and move people through the lines faster. We are also allowing people to wait inside the Service Canada offices. There's still a very high demand, so the lineups continue to be present. We've hired almost 600 people since January. We are in the process of hiring an additional 600 people, and we are reallocating resources internally at Service Canada, about another 600 people, so about 1,800 additional people working on passports. For those that apply in person at a specialized passport office, the turnaround time is less than 10 business days. It's the mail channel that is quite challenging. Pre-pandemic, 80% of people applied in person. We've seen that reverse now, and so we're adjusting our response accordingly. Most people are receiving their passports within 50 business days, and so I do encourage people to give themselves plenty of time if they do need to renew their passport.
Juste rapidement, pour les gens, entre autres, qui font des demandes de nouveaux passeports, quand est-ce que vous vous attendez à ce que la situation soit revenue à la normale, que les délais d'attente soient ce qu'ils étaient pré-pandémiques? Est-ce que ça va être cet été?
Oh, ça dépend beaucoup de l'activité des personnes. Parce que nous savons qu'il y a des millions de personnes qui ont besoin de renouveler leur passeport. Et ce que nous voyons maintenant, c'est qu'avant la pandémie, les passeports étaient vraiment predictable. Alors, on voyait que dans une année, il y avait 2 millions de personnes et ils venaient pour l'année entière. Ce que nous voyons maintenant, c'est que tout le monde applique en même temps. Alors, le système n'est pas construit pour recevoir toutes les applications dans une année à la même temps. Alors, pour cette raison, nous sommes en train de réajuster, mais ce que je dirais aux personnes, c'est vraiment de vous donner beaucoup de temps.
Cet été, là.
Pardon?
Ça ne va pas être réglé cet été.
Non, non. Et les autres pays sont en train d'expérimenter la même chose. Aux États-Unis, c'est 9 à 11 semaines. Au Royaume-Uni, c'est 10 semaines. Alors, c'est quelque chose que, lamentablement, le monde entier est en train d'expérimenter. Mais je comprends, les personnes veulent voyager et on va faire notre mieux pour les aider. Merci.
Yeah, Minister MacAulay, Mackenzie Gray, CTV News. I just want to read you back something you said on Remembrance Day. This is a quote you had. Anything to help the veterans we're going to do. In the wake of the Auditor General's report, do you think you've lived up to that commitment that you've made to the veterans?
Thank you very much for the question. And it's important to realize what the situation was in Veterans Affairs when we formed government. We invested $11 billion.
Years ago, sir. That was 7 years ago.
Pardon?
That was 7 years ago when you formed government.
What happened was we have invested $11 billion approximately into Veterans Affairs Canada. We have hired 1,000 employees that were released of their job. We have invested just approximately $340 million in the last 2 budgets to deal with the backlog. We have hired over 100 adjudicators. We have made sure that with a process in place, that we will make sure that the veterans receive their proper remuneration in the appropriate time. But what you have to do is make sure the funds is there, the technology is there, and we are making sure that that is there.
So 7 years on, it still takes an average of 39 weeks for veterans to get their disability benefit. Do you think that is an acceptable period of time for veterans to have to wait?
Well, you can use whatever figures you wish, but the backlog was at 23,000 2 years ago. We put a number of processes in place. The backlog today is at 10,600, just over. We're on the proper path, as I indicated previously, to make sure that we deal with this appropriately and to put the backlog where it needs to be. I can assure you we have the process in place and we will do that. Thank you.
One more question. Why not lift the requirement to file your taxes so people can get their benefits?